You have more connections in your brain right now than there are stars in 5,000 Milky Way galaxies.
Yeah, it's just a staggering number to even try to comprehend.
Right. I mean, it is a mathematical certainty that your specific pattern of joys, loves, and quirks has never existed in human history. And it will never exist again.
Yeah, exact.
But, the moment you walk into a classroom or an office, it's like the system tries to convince you that you are just an empty vessel.
Which is exactly the problem we're digging into today.
Yes, exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a massive stack of research today, specifically diving into Marcus Buckingham's book, Love Plus Work.
And our mission here is really to rescue you from the crushing weight of, well, information overload about career success.
Yeah, we want to figure out how you can actually decode the unique signals of what you truly love instead of just, doing what the world tells you to care about.
Because we really do spend so much of our lives looking outward, don't we? I mean, we dedicate years to learning the difference between, like, an isosceles and an equilateral triangle.
Oh, yeah, or memorizing the periodic table.
Right, or conjugating verbs in Spanish. We become these experts on the external world, but we remain complete strangers to the machinery of our own fulfillment.
Which brings up this incredibly revealing story from Marcus's research. He was speaking at a leadership conference for SMAW owners, a really sharp, successful group of mostly women.
I love this story.
It's so good. So he asked the audience a simple question. He says, when was the last time you spent any time studying the uniqueness of you?
And what happens?
Well, this woman in the crowd, Destiny, yells out that she took a StrengthsFinder test, and she is super proud of it.
Right, and you can immediately see the punchline coming here because she views this as a massive accomplishment in self-discovery.
She really does. Okay, let's unpack this, because when Marcus asks her how long the actual assessment took, she says 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Yeah. And he asks how long she spent reading her results. She says 15 minutes. And where's the report now?
Stashed in a desk drawer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is 35 minutes total. In her entire life, she's spent 35 minutes studying herself.
Wow.
And when he points this out to her, Destiny laughs and asks the whole room, well, does therapy count?
And the entire audience just erupts in laughter.
Right, because it hits so close to home. Everyone assumes therapy is the ultimate deep dive into the self. But the source material makes a hard pivot here. It argues that no, therapy absolutely does not count when it comes to finding your unique gifts.
Yeah, and that sounds harsh, but it really comes down to the fundamental mechanism of what therapy is designed to do. Therapy, by and large, operates on a deficit model.
A deficit model meaning it looks for what's broken.
Exactly. The psychological and medical establishments are built to identify pathology. They look for the deviation from the norm. The trauma, the anxiety, the maladaptive behavior. And then they try to correct it.
Which is obviously important work.
Oh, incredibly vital, life-saving work. But fixing what is wrong with you is an entirely different biological and psychological process than discovering what is right with you.
Right.
Nobody in that medical model is dedicated to introducing you to yourself at your absolute best.
So it's kind of like taking your car to the mechanic because the engine is smoking and the mechanic fixes the smoke.
Yeah, and the car works.
Right, the car works, but the mechanic doesn't tell you, hey, this car was actually built to race on dirt tracks, not sit in traffic.
Yeah.
They just get you back to the baseline of functioning.
That is a perfect analogy. And, that deficit model doesn't just stop at the therapist's door. It is totally baked into how we are raised.
Oh, for sure.
Think about the trajectory of a standard childhood. Your parents' primary evolutionary goal is just to keep you alive. So your early vocabulary is dominated by no, stop, don't touch that.
Yeah, lots of correction.
And then you enter the education system. If you bring home a report card with an A in art and a C in math, what happens?
The entire parent-teacher conference revolves around how to fix the math grade.
Exactly. The system obsesses over your deficits.
Let me guess. The corporate world is just the adult version of the parent-teacher conference.
The annual performance review is the ultimate example. You sit down with your manager, and the first 10 minutes are a polite, obligatory nod to the projects you successfully delivered.
Right, the sandwich method.
Exactly. And then the remaining 50 minutes are relentlessly dedicated to your areas of opportunity.
Which is just corporate vocabulary for your weaknesses.
Totally. The entire ecosystem is rigged to drill into your flaws.
So if no one is teaching us about what makes us uniquely great, and all our institutions are just drilling into our flaws, what is the actual goal of that system?
Well, it's about standardization.
Right, because if you follow that logic, It implies that schools and workplaces don't actually want us to be unique. They are actively trying to separate us from our innate nature.
They are. The research refers to this as treating human beings like empty vessels. You have to look at the origins of our modern work and school systems. They were built during the Industrial Revolution.
Ah, okay.
And an industrial assembly line only works if every single part is completely interchangeable. If a gear has a unique, beautifully idiosyncratic edge to it, the machine jams.
Wow. So all these things we see as normal.
Yeah, standardized tests, precise job descriptions, rigid career ladders, these are all tools designed to file off your unique edges until you fit the standard slot.
Because to a massive corporation operating on scale, your highly individualized loves are not assets. They are variables that mess up the math.
Precisely.
It sounds like we're taking beautiful, wild forests and trying to pave them over to make identical gray parking lots. Wait, no, parking lot's the wrong way to think about it. It's exactly what you just said. It's an assembly line.
Yeah, an assembly line.
And the human cost of being forced onto that assembly line is absolutely staggering. You look at the data on the epidemic of lost people, and it is heartbreaking.
It really is. The most poignant example of that cost comes from Donnie Fitzpatrick. He's a high school counselor up in Canada, just north of Vancouver.
Oh, right, the one who does those crazy long interviews.
Yeah. Instead of the typical 15-minute rush job to pick classes, Donnie does these intensive one-hour interviews with senior students, but he doesn't ask them about their GPA or what college they want to attend or their extracurriculars.
He asks them the questions the assembly line never asks. Things like, who are you? How do you make decisions? Tell me about the last time a day just completely flew by for you.
And the reaction he gets is alarming. Keep in mind, he has done over 4,000 of these hour-long interviews.
4,000.
Yeah, and the kids will skip their classes, they will skip lunch, but they never miss an appointment with Donnie. They show up, they sit in his office, and almost all of them cry.
Just from being asked what they actually care about.
The devastating part of Donnie's observation is who cries the most. It is not the kids who are struggling academically. The students who break down the hardest are the highest achievers.
Wait, really? The ones with the perfect grades?
Exactly. The ones with the most impressive college applications. The ones who have done every single thing the empty vessel system demanded of them. They have achieved the standardized ideal, and the stress of that relentless conformity has completely severed their connection to their own authentic voice.
They look at Donnie and realize they have no idea who they actually are.
It's awful.
And that disconnection doesn't magically resolve itself when you get handed a diploma. It compounds. Marcus shares his own terrifying experience with this in the research. Here's a guy who is incredibly successful by every metric the system values.
Right.
He's 29, working a massive corporate job, managing a multi-million-dollar relationship with Walt Disney World. He is sitting in a high-end steakhouse at a Disney resort with a bunch of executives.
And then what happens?
Suddenly, his peripheral vision starts to blur. He feels this crushing physical pressure on his chest. Time starts stuttering. He has this primal, mad need to just stand up and run away from the table.
It was a massive panic attack. When he finally saw a doctor, the diagnosis wasn't a physical heart condition. The doctor told him his mind was wearing out from the sheer vigilance of living a life on edge.
He was a ghost in his own life. He even talks about an Oprah episode that was entirely devoted to his work. You'd think that's the pinnacle.
The ultimate dream.
But he looks back at a photo of himself on stage, hugging Oprah, and he describes his own grinning face in that picture as a happy, hollow man. It's chilling. Success in the assembly line doesn't protect you from alienation, it actually accelerates it.
Because the more successful you are at conforming to the standard slot, the further you move from your innate nature. The friction between who you are expected to be and who you actually are eventually burns out the engine.
Think about what happens when someone with a beautifully unique nature is forced into one of these standardized boxes. There's a story about Marcus's fiancée, Michelle, that perfectly illustrates the psychological violence of this process.
Oh, the journal entry.
Yeah, she wrote this journal entry comparing her childhood to her sisters, calling them Camp Weird and Camp Normal. Her older sister was the undisputed queen of Camp Normal. She was a cheerleader, gregarious, fit the mold effortlessly.
And Michelle was different.
Totally different. She instinctively loved hiding under tables to draw. She would sit for hours making intricate things out of corn husks. She found deep, sustaining comfort in these highly specific, idiosyncratic activities.
But look at the feedback loop she received from her environment. Her family, her Portuguese grandmother, her aunts, her sister, they all looked at her under the table and told her she was weird.
Yeah, they didn't get it.
They didn't do it maliciously. They just lacked the vocabulary for anything outside the assembly line. Watching Bob Ross paint while everyone else is playing outside, weird. Making corn husk dolls, weird. So Michelle internalized that assessment.
She accepted the lie that her unique loves were a problem to be solved. She literally took a pair of scissors, cut her hair to have bangs exactly like her sister, and spent the next decade forcing herself to conform.
It's so sad.
She became a cheerleader. She was crowned a Mayday princess. She went to San Diego State University, joined a sorority, and completely exhausted herself, studying to maintain a perfect GPA. She did everything humanly possible to buy her way into Camp Normal.
And the physical toll was horrifying. By graduation, she weighed 74 pounds.
74 pounds.
She was literally starving herself to fit the mold. She was losing her hair. And despite achieving the Camp Normal dream, she still felt like a profound disappointment.
It is the ultimate tragedy of the empty vessel illusion. The system feeds us a fundamental lie that the things that naturally draw your attention, the things that give you effortless joy, are just childhood delusions.
And the underlying message is that you are infinitely malleable. That growing up means outgrowing your specific loves and replacing them with whatever the market, the school board, or the corporate hierarchy demands.
But the biological reality completely shatters that lie. We are not infinitely malleable. And this brings us to a concept that completely changes how we should view ourselves. It's an ancient Norse concept called "you're weird."
Spelled W-Y-R-D.
Right, it sounds just like the word weird, but it refers to the distinct, wild, innate spirit you are born with.
The Norse viewed it spiritually, but today we actually have the hard neurobiology to prove it physically exists.
Okay, lay the science on me.
Let's look at the actual architecture of your brain. You have roughly 100 billion neurons, but the raw number of neurons isn't what makes you unique. It is the specific way they wire together.
Right.
Each of those 100 billion neurons reaches out and makes thousands of synaptic connections with other neurons.
Which brings us back to that mind-blowing statistic from the beginning.
Exactly the math of it. That network results in roughly 100 trillion synaptic connections. To visualize that scale, the Milky Way galaxy has about 400 billion stars.
Right.
Your brain has more connections within it right now than there are stars in 5,000 Milky Way galaxies.
Okay, that scale is almost impossible to comprehend. But what does that staggering dense network actually do?
It is the physical, biological manifestation of your word. That specific 100 trillion connection map dictates what you remember, what makes you laugh, what calms your nervous system, what naturally fascinates you.
Because of the astronomical scale of those connections, your specific pattern of loves and reactions is shared with no one else.
Exactly. Not a single person in human history has ever had your exact neural architecture, and no one ever will.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Wait, society loves to put us in boxes, right?
Yeah.
You're the organized one, I'm the spontaneous one. But the text says these categories are fake, right?
They fail us completely. Broad psychological categories are cheap shortcuts. They obscure the actual truth of human behavior. There's a brilliant case study in the research regarding Michel's two sons that proves how useless these labels are.
Oh, walk me through that.
So if a standard child psychologist observed them, they would categorize them entirely wrong. The younger son loves to cook, but when he's in the kitchen, it is a disaster zone.
Like pots and pans everywhere.
Worse, there is literal butter smeared on the walls, strawberries mashed into the counter crevices. Standard psychology slaps a label on him, disorganized, lacks executive function.
But then you look at his room, right?
Yeah, you walk upstairs to his bedroom, his closet is meticulously color-coded, his outfit for the next day is perfectly laid out on his chair down to the socks.
And the older brother is the exact mirror image of this.
Precisely. The older brother walks into the kitchen, immediately uses hand sanitizer, carefully wipes up every single drop of juice, and puts the cutting board back in its exact slot. Standard psychology says, highly conscientious, very organized.
But walk up to his bedroom.
And it looks like a towel fairy exploded. Clothes in piles, books everywhere. You cannot categorize these boys with broad labels like organized or messy.
Because messy isn't a personality trait. It is a reaction to a specific environment. Their behaviors are dictated by highly specific, individualized loves and loathes. The younger one loves the aesthetic control of his clothing, but loses himself in the chaotic creativity of cooking. Only by paying attention to those incredibly specific loves can you reveal the true word.
And this is where we have to pivot from the theory of the brain to the practical reality of how you actually navigate your life.
Because we have to live in the real world.
Right. If you have this incredibly unique, immutable word in your head, how do you actually grow? A lot of people hear this and assume, well, if my brain is hardwired this way, I'm stuck. I can't change.
So what does this all mean for our weaknesses? Should we just ignore the stuff we're bad at?
Let's look at the brain plasticity truths first. The brain grows by adding buds to existing branches. It does not grow by sprouting entirely new branches out of thin air.
Okay, so growth happens where there's already a foundation.
Yes, we grow exponentially in areas where we already have natural ease and appetite. The areas where you naturally lack connections, the things you loathe, you can't force them to blossom. You can't change the shape of your word.
I'm going to push back on this because, again, real world. If I am fundamentally terrible at spreadsheets and my boss says, I need this spreadsheet by Friday, I can't just look at her and say, sorry, my word doesn't do Excel. I would get fired.
And that is the crucial tension. The system tells you that to fix a weakness, you must relentlessly drill into it. If you are bad at spreadsheets, take an intensive 3-day Excel bootcamp until you conquer it.
Right.
But the biological reality says that is a recipe for burnout. The secret to managing your weaknesses is counterintuitive. You have to leverage the wisdom of your loves. You don't fix a weakness by staring directly at it.
Wait, walk me through the actual cognitive process there. How does doing something I love help me finish the spreadsheet I hate?
It's about neurochemical resilience. Let's say mentoring a junior colleague is a specific activity you love.
Yeah.
When you do that, your brain releases dopamine and norepinephrine. You feel capable, clear-headed, and energized.
Okay, I'm with you.
That flood of neurochemicals is literal fuel. It builds your executive function. So you intentionally schedule that 30-minute mentoring session right before you have to tackle the spreadsheet. You are using the neurochemical momentum generated by your weird to power through the barren branch of data entry.
Oh, wow, your loves are the engine of your resilience.
Exactly.
That completely flips the script. It's not about finding a magical job where you never have to do a spreadsheet. It's about managing your energy. But we always hear that famous Steve Jobs advice. The only way to do great work is to love what you do.
Right, everyone quotes that.
That sounds great for a billionaire, but the data says almost no one loves all of what they do.
Right.
Isn't that setting the listener up for failure?
It is terrible advice if interpreted literally. Expecting a job where 100% of your tasks are joyful is a fantasy. The research proves this.
What did they find?
When researchers studied the most successful, resilient, and thriving people across various fields, doctors, teachers, housekeepers, entrepreneurs, they found that these people do not love everything they do.
So if they don't love their whole job, how are they not burning out like Marcus did at the Disney Steakhouse?
They practice a very specific skill. When surveyed, these highly thriving people separated themselves from everyone else by answering strongly agreed to 2 specific questions.
Okay, what were the questions?
First, did you have a chance to play to your strengths every day? And second, were you excited to go to work every day last week?
Notice the precise phrasing there.
Yes. It doesn't ask if they loved all day. It asks if they had a chance to play to their strengths every day.
Oh. They don't love everything they do. They deliberately find the love in what they do.
That is the core mechanism of thriving. The research calls these moments your red threads. Think of your job as a tapestry. It might be 80% gray threads. Boring meetings, tedious paperwork, frustrating client calls.
Yeah, the daily grind.
But thriving people have developed the skill to intentionally identify the specific idiosyncratic activities that excite them, and they deliberately weave those red threads into their daily routine.
So they ensure that at least some percentage of their day contains those high dopamine, wired-aligned tasks.
Exactly. The tipping point seems to be about 20%. If you can deliberately weave in 20% red threads, maybe it's a specific type of complex problem solving or organizing a project timeline, or the 5 minutes you spend making a beautifully structured presentation slide.
Just 20%.
Just 20% provides enough neurochemical resilience to sustain you through the 80% gray.
Let's ground this in extreme reality for the listener right now. If someone is listening to this on their commute, dreading their Tuesday, what is the literal homework assignment? How do they find a red thread today?
Audit your calendar tomorrow morning. Look at your schedule between 9 a.m. and noon. Do not look for a sweeping passion like, I want to save the environment. Look for micro moments.
Like really specific tasks.
Exactly. Which specific 15-minute task makes time accelerate for you? Which email are you actually looking forward to writing? Which specific type of meeting makes you feel more energized when you leave than when you entered? Isolate that one activity. That is a red thread.
And then what?
Your job is to figure out how to pull that specific thread more often.
Because work isn't just a title or a company name. The definition of work we are using here is anything of value you create for someone else.
And when you define work that way, the profound takeaway is a total reframing of why we work at all. The true purpose of work isn't just to earn a paycheck or climb a corporate ladder or please the assembly line manager.
Right.
The purpose of work is to help you discover what you love. Work is the sandbox where you get to test out your weird and see what gives you energy. Work is for love.
I cannot overstate how powerful that reframe is.
Mm.
Work is for love. It completely dismantles the narrative of I work to survive and replaces it with I use work as an instrument to figure out who I actually am.
It strips the power away from the standardized system and gives it back to the individual. You stop waiting for an institution to validate you, and you start using the institution to map your own neurobiology.
So to bring this all together for you listening, the mission today was to cut through the noise and figure out how to decode the unique signals of what you actually love.
Oh,
And what we've uncovered is that you are absolutely not an empty vessel waiting to be filled with corporate jargon and standardized skills.
not even close.
You have literal galaxies within you. You have a weird 100 trillion unique synaptic connections that make you see the world, process information, and experience joy in a way that no one else ever has or ever will.
Exactly.
Your weirdness isn't a deficit you need to fix. It is the only thing you have that cannot be replicated by a machine or another human being.
And you protect that uniqueness not by rebelling aimlessly, but by paying intense forensic attention to those red threads. You use those micro moments of flow to navigate the inevitable gray parts of your life, building the resilience to thrive on your own terms.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. Think back to the beginning, when we talked about spending years studying triangles instead of ourselves. If you're weird, your completely unique neurological pattern is a temporary, brilliant flash that has never existed before and will never exist again. What happens to the world if you decide to play it safe and keep your true loves hidden under the kitchen table? Consider that sharing exactly what you love might not just be the key to your own happiness, but the exact missing piece someone else's life is waiting for.